we have on Freedom Convoy lawyer Eva Chipiuk joining us today to discuss what went on at the Emergencies Act inquiry. Eva, how are you doing?
All right. It was a really long day. I can't even believe we had the finance department up first. It seems like it was yesterday or last week, almost even now. Any questions for me?
Well, the finance department, as you mentioned, is basically the finance ministry. So that's the people who have Chrystia Freeland.
They work under Chrystia Freeland. Those are her lackeys. That's as I described them today during my live tweeting. As you could tell, there was no one there really. There's no head honcho, maybe apart from the main footman being, his name has escaped me, the one in the middle that just was.
Well, I believe that Michael Sabia, Deputy Minister of Finance. So,
that's right.
Yeah,
yes.
Can you give us a quick rundown of their testimony? What's the most important thing that we need to catch from their testimony?
Again, it was so long ago, and I'm trying to, that's why I was hoping you would shoot me a question. But what I do recall 110% is that for at least the first hour, they were going on and on about economic impacts because of the border blockades and the protest in general. And then under questioning still with the Commission Counsel, she is basically asked, she took them to a document, and it said that there were no significant impacts to the economy as a result of the protests. So kind of shot down basically the first hour of their evidence. And, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. And we had some of this evidence yesterday, is that when you lock down a country for 2 years, you're going to affect the economy. When you're going to add in an ArriveCan app that doesn't work for other countries, you're going to affect the economy. When you have a vaccine mandate, you're going to affect the economy. So these three massive things that weren't discussed, that massively affect the economy, weren't considered, were kind of disregarded. And yet a protest, if we're talking about Windsor Bridge, like 5 people, 5 days, and this is what we're talking about at the inquiry? I don't think so.
Yeah, something very particularly disturbing that I found about something that Sabia said was that he made this border blockade, specifically talking about the one at Ambassador Bridge. He started talking about the real human impacts of that. Are you kidding me? Where's the evidence? To go over the last 2 years and the real human impact of the people that lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods, their lives. They experienced cutback budgeting, etc. You name it. People, not just in Canada, the whole world experienced that. And so the fact that he had the audacity to point out that there were real human impacts of other people due to the fact that these handful of people went to Windsor Bridge and parked their trucks there along the road, not even directly on the blockade. There's distance between the border, actually. It was insane to me.
Yeah.
It was, I reached a boiling point today, maybe more than a few times, if you could tell by my live tweeting, but
no, I think that's the question that she asked. How can you disregard everything that happened in the past 2 years
and talk
pandemic?
About
100%.
What reality are they living in?
Just to give the viewers a quick look at what his testimony looked like, what that testimony looked like with this panel of the 3 people from the finance ministry. Let's take a look at clip number 5, where the same person, the Deputy Minister of Finance, said, well, there was a very simple solution for everyone. All you had to do is leave. That's all that we had to do. Let's just check it out.
The government announced its intention to proclaim or to invoke the Emergencies Act on the 14th. It was very clear as of that date, and the Minister of Finance was very clear as of that date, that people involved in these disruptions ran the risk of having their accounts frozen. That was very clear. So there was a period of notice there, and it was very clear that all that had to happen was for those people to leave, and as if they did, their accounts would never have been frozen, or that they would be immediately unfrozen if they did leave. So I think people had reasonable notice, and it was a very simple solution. All you had to do was leave.
That's very simple to me. All you had to do was leave.
And all the federal government had to do was talk to them. So there we go.
That's a
Easy
very good
solutions
response.
both ways.
Yeah.
So what I was talking about before was the intelligence. And so that was the first bit in, you know, how much the economy was affected. And then the second part of their conversation was about enforcement. And now I'm remembering, it's coming back to me. I was in shock as to what they were proposing to the banks. So they sent to the banks two proposals. One is we could tell you who the designated people are, and then you take the measures to freeze their bank accounts. Or number two, watch the news and then make a decision and freeze their bank accounts. So now we're giving enforcement powers to the bank based on the news. Why do we have police? Do we have intelligence reports?
Yeah, no, 100%. And there's another thing too. I think it came out during either Brendan Miller's testimony or this counsel for the CCR. Is that
CCLA and CCF?
Okay, so just before we get to that, can you tell us a little bit more about this lawyer? Do you know about him?
No, I don't.
Okay, well today, you know, we always praise Brendan Miller as being a great lawyer, but today we saw another lawyer also stand out from the crowd, the same lawyer who was cross-examining.
What I
witness.
do know about him, I could say, is his name is Sujit Chowdhury. That's who you just saw, and he is on. I think it is the CCF.
CCF
or
CCLA.
CCLA. There's a couple acronyms, but together with Brendan Miller, with the JCCF, CCLA, CCF, they're doing a judicial review of the Emergencies Act. So they've been in court since March in federal court, already arguing some of these things. So they've seen the issues that were arising, and he was making these arguments because this is a huge issue of government overreach that I think everyone is concerned about.
Yeah, well, there's one question that I wanted to get to. I believe it was Brendan Miller. I believe it was during Brendan Miller's cross-examination. He was trying to ask whether or not the Freedom Convoy was a political process, was a political cause. You know, because donating to a political cause under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms is something that's protected because of Canada. We are supposed to have freedom of speech. That's something we're supposed to have as Canadians.
Yeah.
But the minister, the deputy minister, didn't seem to want to give a definite answer as to whether or not the Freedom Convoy was a political cause, which I mean, it is a political cause. That's what it is. What else should it be? What did you make of that line of questioning?
Yeah, it was pretty silly, in my opinion. There was so much dancing around the questions today, and I don't know if they think that that's a good way of responding, but if you're a government official and meant to enforce and you're in this power position, you can't say you don't know these answers. That is incredibly irresponsible for these civil servants to be acting this way and to be talking this way. So, he said, as a civilian, maybe that's what it is. Well, if you're going to start enforcing, figure out what the issue is first. Don't come to an inquiry about the Emergencies Act without the answers.
No, for sure. I do agree that there was a lot of dancing around the question, not answering the straight question. How did you notice that as well?
Oh, don't get me started. Don't make them subjected to just, okay, actually, yes. So 100%. I would, yeah, thanks for asking me that. Like, are you serious? That's all I saw today. It's actually alarming because that's actually starting to increase. I'm realizing is that there's almost like there was a bit of a standard during the beginning, right? Those things weren't allowed. People weren't really doing them. If they didn't know how to answer a question, it was far and few in between. They didn't know how to answer the question. Now we're seeing consistently they're even like just getting a rise out of the people around them, making really smart mouth comments, and just, you know, either being really forgetful, like we saw with Brenda Lucky having potentially even issues with her memory, which she should probably go and get checked out as a commissioner of the RCMP. That's pretty crazy. But unless everyone is being subjected to having memory issues, we definitely have an issue going on. And it's, like I said, it's very alarming because if this continues, as we're leading up to the very last week of the commission, what are we going to expect from the actual ministers that these people serve? These are all deputy ministers. We have yet to hear a testimony from a minister. So
yeah, no, totally. And his whole testimony was odd. Deputy Minister of Finance, his whole testimony was super odd. I found it was very weird to listen to, a little bit frustrating. Let's take a look at clip number 3, and that's another clip that was also weird, where he talks about the fact that, well, the Emergencies Act only impacted certain people, and then he goes into grocery money that he didn't want it to impact. Let's just take a look at what he had to say to that effect. All right, clip number 3. Yeah.
Police witnesses who've said they saw your measures work because they heard of people getting calls back from North Battleford or whatever, come home, the account's frozen and I can't buy groceries, right? That the police saw that as your measures working because they were affecting people who had nothing to do with the protest other than that they were family members. So, I put it to you that you must have realized that would be one of the effects of freezing the accounts in the way that they were.
When we developed the policy, we were focusing on those people involved in illegal activities. And certainly in our daily discussions with the CBA, and, we had discussion with the RCMP, certainly these issues came to life. That was not the focus of the policy development. We understand that was, maybe some people were impacted, but we had discussions in the application to say our focus was certainly on these people involved in the activity.
So what sort of an answer even is that? That wasn't even a direct answer. So that's something that they admitted that they it might happen. It was a potentiality, and they still didn't put any foolproof measures into preventing something like that. These were people that weren't even there, and they were just associated to it, like the guilty by association. So your mom goes to the Convoy, and then 3 cousins down in another province, they can't pay their rent or buy groceries or see to their basic human needs because the government didn't do their job correctly. Sorry, the federal government, to be very specific. And these are the people, feast your eyes, that created those policies that allowed them to be able to freeze bank accounts in the first place. It's one thing to hear about the people that create the policies, but it's one thing to put a face to them, which is why I got saucy today, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think and we're gonna have a second guest afterwards coming on, Tom Morazzo, who this affected him directly, and he'll be able to talk to us a little bit more about that. But just because you disagreed with the government decided that it was okay to just shut you off and take your money and freeze your assets, freeze your bank account, and affect your whole family. Eva? Yeah,
well, one thing I did want to say is that they were clear and very open about them directing this policy, but then they wouldn't take any responsibility for it, which was also very concerning. They said, well, it was on the banks. And then even their government lawyer at the end was like, well, the banks could have called you, couldn't it? If the RCMP is sending you a document directing you to close people's bank accounts, are you going to call? I don't even who do you call? Do you call the deputy minister himself? Do you call the RCMP? And excuse me, I have a quick question about this document you sent me. If the RCMP is taking the authority and enforcing these things, you think that they're doing it on good reason. And if they're expecting people to question it, the rule of law today has been undermined by our own government. And that was Brendan Miller's first question to Jody Thomas today.
Well, that's a good segue to Jody Thomas. What's her role in the government? I had some issue understanding what exactly was her position.
So it's a bit hard to understand, and I think that if we don't understand the role that government plays, I think there is a problem. From what I'm saying, sitting through the last how many ever weeks it is we are so incredibly overregulated. I'm just going to use that now. So she's with the Privy Council office, and her role is National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister. This is not an office or a role that was created by Parliament, there's no legislation giving them any authority. So it's a very good question who she is. It's uncertain, and not only who she is, but the demand for authority she had in her evidence today. She was, she said, I need more authority, I need more intelligence, I need more ability to control people. That was how her testimony was coming across today to me. And who is she and why is she doing her job? That's a question I think that Canadians really need to look into a bit more.
Well, and I'm not even sure she knows what her job is actually, because she didn't even find out about the Hendon reports until today's proceedings as she watched the earlier testimonies of today. What is going on with that? How is these are people that are supposed to have an intelligence position. She's advisor of national security. She reports directly to PM Justin Trudeau. Like, where is the missing gap? She kept on talking about that there was an issue with the framework within this country regarding the intelligence and type of data collected. She gave multiple references towards how, again, people need to be monitored more in essence, and how there's this big disconnect and really overstepping, because there are already measures in place where we have intelligence agencies, primarily the CSIS. CSIS, what does it stand for again?
Canadian Security Intelligence Services. I believe that's what it is.
So they're the largest moving body in Canada to provide intelligence on matters like this. And again, I will reiterate, they are the only opinion that matters when it comes to providing that intelligence. And it was ignored. So the fact that this woman could stand there and demand more responsibility, more, I mean, she's like, she came across as the literal interpretation of the overhanging federal arm where people's actual privacy is concerned. That's pretty scary to me.
So let's just talk about the information from CSIS that was ignored, because what they said is they do not investigate Canadians that are taking part in a lawful protest. Because why would you be surveilling Canadians that are being lawful? That's what she wanted to do. That's the information she didn't like. That's the disconnect she found with CSIS. And moreover, CSIS added that if you do more government overreach, people will become more disenfranchised because they believe the system is broken. So the fact that this individual is not taking the advice of CSIS, and there's good reason that CSIS is saying what they're doing, there is a huge problem. That what is it that you want from, like, do you just want such an obedient society in Canada, not to have an opinion, not to think outside the box, just to, like, I don't know what it is that you're looking for, because she's basically looking for surveillance on Canadians that are being lawful.
No, 100%. And as you just put it, I mean, I doubt that unless CSIS just has like an inherent desire to want to watch Canadians play in bouncy castles and have a real good party and just literally a hoot and a half out on the streets of Ottawa, then really, like, what a horrible thing for them. Like, it's a terrible use of their ability to like provide surveillance, because I mean, it was even regarded in that document that Brendan Miller brought up during his cross-examination. So maybe we could throw to that clip. I'm not sure which one it would be.
Well,
but
before throwing to any clip, let's take a look once again at Brendan Miller's cross-examination, clip number 7 of Jody Thomas, just to give the viewers a little idea of who she is and what she looks like, because we've been talking for a little while and people don't necessarily know who Jody Thomas is. So let's take a look at clip number 7, part of Brendan Miller's cross-examination of this pretty important witness.
Right, I understand. So you're saying that the CSIS Act and Section 2 of the CSIS Act, which is incorporated into the Emergencies Act, means something different when you're looking at it?
No, that's not what I've said.
So what do you mean?
I mean that in terms of the Emergency Act, the Governor and Council can consider more broadly than the intelligence collected by CSIS in determining a national security threat or situation or a public order emergency.
I understand that, but you do agree that the 4 grounds of types of threats in Section 2 of the CSIS Act are what is in fact required to have been found.
No, I don't agree.
So it can go beyond what the Act says, which is a threat to the security of Canada.
There are other definitions of threats to the security of Canada, as we saw earlier.
Right, but not in the legislation.
The Emergency Act allows for the Governor and Council to make a broad decision about public order emergencies.
That's not what it says, but you can agree with me.
I think that this is an argument to have with lawyers.
Good thing we have one.
I want to talk. I'm so glad you brought up that clip, because it is so hard to watch somebody change the definition. They said they don't agree with the definition of the law.
Yeah.
Then when you challenge them on that definition, she reverts to, you could have that debate with my lawyers. I am not a lawyer. So you can't change the definition if you can't justify that change in the definition, especially when it has something to do with something this important, like threat to the national security of Canada. You can't just willy-nilly change that definition and expect nobody to question you on it when you're the security advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada.
Well, yeah, and not just, you can't expect people not to question you. It's like you can't even answer the question yourself. So how do you expect for someone to believe, trust, or like back up what you have to say at all when you have no retort other than ask my lawyer, because I will not have this argument with you?
And this is what I was saying before. If this is what these government officials think are good answers at the inquiry, I think they will be sorely wrong. You're coming to an inquiry. You're meant to provide information. And this is another thing Brendan Miller had to do today with the finance panel. He had to explain to them, you understand we're here to talk about the circumstances that justified the invocation of the Emergencies Act. That's why we're here. We're not here to have a fun time at this commission. It's about gaining information. And if you have no information, this is not a good thing for you.
Yes.
No, 100%. And it's always changing blame, switching the blame from one person to the other. All right, Eva, I'd love to have you on more, but we have another lawyer in the room who's ready to come on the show. Any last words for us about the commission? Anything that we missed? Any relevant detail or something? Any relevant comment?
No, but again, I don't want to leave it on a negative note. I think that what I hope this commission is doing and this inquiry is opening up the eyes of Canadians. It certainly opened up my eyes to be way more involved in politics and make sure that we're holding these people to account. So the words came up today, hold the line, that rhetoric, that violent rhetoric. What it is hold the government to account. And I'm going to be asking all of Canada, we really need to do that moving forward because this is not a good place.
Right, totally, Eva. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Let's
throw to a quick ad break, and when we come back, we'll have a second lawyer on the live stream. Let's go throw to a quick ad break.